Hello and welcome everybody to this afternoon's webinar on how to save time and money using process automation. The session presenters for our webinar today consist of Mike Borden, he's a Senior Account Manager here at TCN, and Scott Brownlee, who specializes in the product training and customer engagement. Taking a look at our agenda for today, we'll start out with Mike, and he will be taking us through how companies have parsed data, saved time, and implemented TCN's list management services with a demo and a walkthrough. We'll also be taking a look at specific clients that are currently using TCN's list management services. And then we'll also take a look at TCN's new scrub process and how it's saving time through the reassign number database and other data providers with Scott Brownlee. For the first session, as I mentioned, we'll be hearing from Mike Borden. Since joining TCN 18 years ago, Mike has played an integral part of the company's growth, client implementation through personalized customer service and dependability. Mike has dramatically contributed to making TCN a #1 provider. We're excited to hear from Mike about how to maximize process automation. With that, you can take it from there.
Great, thank you, McKay. So as McKay mentioned, we'll be going through some user stories. We'll be demonstrating how list management services has affected our users and what they have utilized throughout that process. Now, keep in mind, because we are keeping this short and sweet, this is just scratching the surface of list management services. This is not every single thing you can do, but it is here to give you an idea of what is possible. So story number one is providing information about a client that was looking to utilize TCN, and they were looking to do so without a lot of programming on their CRM side. They didn't want to involve their development team in major updates, and they really wanted the control of the data and the data manipulation and the data management done within TCN's user interface so that the operations team could do it themselves instead of having to loop in IT, instead of having to loop in the outside contractors for the CRM. So what they've done is they've set up list management services in such a way to facilitate that. Now, list management services is found within your TCN interface. It is found under the operator interface and list management services. Step one is actually to customize your file format and your field definitions. The information that you load into list management services is going to fit your specifications. You don't have to fit into a TCN box or a TCN form. If you utilize account number, you utilize customer ID, you utilize debtor information, use that. Don't translate it in the hope that it fits into the TCN world. Name it what makes sense to you. Keep those naming conventions, that file format, the order of the columns, all to match what you already have. Don't spend manual time modifying things. Don't spend manual time manipulating the data. You can set up the TCN system to fit your existing files. And I say files because within list management services, you are not limited to one file, one set of field definitions. You can have as many different field definitions as you need to make your data work within TCN. You also have the ability to set up those multiple files, not only just file formats, but order of columns, even types of files. We can ingest a CSV file or a tab delimited file. We can ingest a JSON file, depending on the type of entry point. All of this information is available and controllable by you within this field definition interface. Now, if I do go back, I want to look at this flow right down here. I have two entry points. Now, an entry point is orange, an action is blue, an exchange is purple. Information about these different types of nodes can be found in our Learning Center. You can simply click on the little hat in the top right-hand corner, and you can take a look at our LMS specific Learning Center. You can go through your quick start guide, you can go through definition and glossary of entry points, you can go into the different actions, we will give you examples, we will describe the enrichments, we will describe the exchanges. Keep in mind, you also do have access to the Learning Center under the integrated infrastructure menu, and you can come in here and there's other options to go through. List management services is one of the options here. Now, At no time are you expected to be an expert in list management services on day one. As always, you do have access to your account management team here at TCN to hold your hand and walk you through the process. This process was constructed with help from the account management team for the client that I described to, again, make sure that their operations team had the ability to manipulate the data. Here we have an upload entry point. This allows me to manually upload the file. Now, the file format is predefined. I already set that up. The field definitions, predefined. I already set that up. All I have to do is click on upload, and the file will progress through these steps. Steps like filtering out when one of my fields is less than 90 days. Filtering out when a specific field, which is a date format field, is after 90 days ago. I can execute these filters. I can execute one after the other to begin parsing my data, or I can just execute those filters, make a smaller and smaller file. Theoretically, this filter says I want everything that's less than 90 days old. I can go through another filter. I want where my field in my file that's fully customizable of consent is equal to yes. And then I can filter where my balance due is greater than $50, because that is all the data I've loaded in my file. Now, I can do one filter, then another filter, then another filter. I can expand the filter with end statements. But really what the idea is to take this data and at the end of the process, spit out exactly what I want. This purple exchange here is a P3 exchange. This is made specifically for call campaigns. I can set up this exchange. I can name it anything I want. I can modify my name of my file so I can better identify it when the calls are running. I can pick which columns go into my back office system for that calling process. I can define my import template. I can define my outbound template. I can even customize some of the settings. Do I want to enable follow the sun so I don't call too early? Do I want to schedule it by time zone? Do I want to have a start time of 9 a.m. every morning? I can set that up in this exchange, and once my file goes through the process, the exchange will take over. Now, I also have an SFTP entry point. This will grab the file from an SFTP server, and it will process it through these steps. One of these steps I have tied to this SFTP entry point is a journey exchange. I have this process taking my call data, or email data, or SMS data. Let's go with outbound data. I have this process taking my outbound data and saving into a journey collection so that I can utilize that for inbound call routing, inbound lookup, and reporting purposes. Journey is housed under the Journey Data Explorer. You could have multiple collections. Again, all these formats are fully customizable as well. And it's really just a matter of warehousing data for reference purposes at a later date. One of those reference purposes can actually be the next day's LMS process. So here again, I have a file coming in. I have a script running outside of TCN, outside the SFTP server that I did pay some contractor to do because I'm not going to write the script myself. And every morning, I dump files onto my own SFTP server. The TCN system is capable of reaching out to your server with your credentials or a passkey, and in the appropriate directory, pulling a file. Now, you can pull a specific file based on the file name, or you can run a random wildcard like this and pull any file that exists in that defined directory. You can also set up what time of the day and how often the TCN system will pull files. So the idea for this client was they wanted a couple options. They want to make sure that they can send us files. They want to make sure that their operations team can manipulate the data through this lovely user interface. And they wanted to make sure that all the files they sent us on a day-to-day basis could be referenced if someone called them back through the TCN inbound template. That is taken care of with this simple flow. The file comes in, we put everything in Journey for reference purposes at a later date and time, and then we begin parsing the file. Now, We also have another example of a client, and this client wasn't as complicated as the sense that they needed to parse the file and they needed to sort or filter the data, but they did have tons of files. Their CRM was capable of running queries. Their CRM was capable of spitting out exactly the file that they wanted, but they wanted to make sure that it could be an automated process in TCN. So what they needed to do was, instead of giving us one large file and utilizing our user interface to split that up, they needed to drop 100 files onto an SFTP server, and they needed us to ingest them. Their flow looked somewhat like this. This flow is set that a file comes in and it is parsed out into a bunch of different pieces. But it doesn't have to be just one entry point. Here you'll see I have upload part 1 and upload part 2. These can be separate entry points referencing separate directories or separate file names, and they can ingest separate files. So if a client has a need where they have an SFTP server, or they want to place the files on our SFTP server, that's perfectly fine. They can dump 100 files into a directory, and then based on the file name, the TCN LMS system can ingest that data and process it through a specific flow. Now, I did throw in a little filter here. I wanted to filter by my FICO score. So if my FICO score is above 740, it gets included, or if my score is above 800, it gets included. But we really don't need to have that filter. We don't need to have that action. I can really just delete this action and have an in and an out. The file comes in and it goes out automatically to the P3 system for calling. So what this did for client, the secondary client, which is story B, it's mixed letters and numbers. What this did for them is this allowed them to use their very nice, fully functional CRM to create dozens, if not 100 files, place them all onto an SFTP server, and the TCN LMS system pull every single one of those files and execute a different campaign for each and every one automatically every day. No more need to move files, no more need to check it. Once the file is processed, you can actually go into LMS, you can go into the LM history, and you can see if the process worked. You can get an alert that shows you on the screen here that a campaign was initiated. It'll show you the campaign ID. So you can go into the back office interface and you can look up that campaign and watch it. Now, story C was a mix of both of those, more or less. It wanted to have the ability for the TCN system to ingest a large file, but instead of going down a singular path, it wanted to split it up into multiple campaigns. So here what we have is a flow with some more filters. Now, there's a couple different ways that you can conceptualize the filters on TCN. There's a couple different ways, if it works logically for you, that you can make the process go. What I've done here is I've started with keeps and discards. What I mean by that is I have an automated process where I grab a file from an SFTP server and I have a filter. Include where my days late is less than 90. Just like my other filter. Honestly, I actually copied it. I literally went down here and clicked on the copy button. But created my other filter. Now I wanted to keep all of my less than 90s, but I also wanted to deal with everything else. So what I did was I added a new action. I edited that action. Filter by, well, let's do score on this one. And I set up a new filter. Now, I don't have to copy, I don't have to paste, I don't even have to type. I literally just have to click on the appropriate drop down here. Autocomplete, not drop down. Include where, open bracket, score is greater than or equal to. Now I know my scores are numbers because that's what I defined in my file definitions. So I'm just going to set it as a number. What this allows me to do, because there's multiple filters tied to the end of this one, is define what ones get kept and which ones get discarded. What that means is everything that has a day's overdue of less than 90 follows the gray lines. Everything that has the opposite, everything that does not fit the filter, follows the red line. And I can parse that and I can break it out bit by bit because that's what makes sense. I don't want to set up my filters in such a way that they are mutually exclusive like this. Here I have a file coming in. Here I have it filtering out a specific status. And then I have an age 11 tier 3. That doesn't ever overlap with age 27 tier 3, which doesn't ever overlap with age 23 in tier 1. So I can set up these filters in line like this, all of the files being processed at the same time, compared to where I have these keeps and these discards, where my file comes in and a different file goes to the gray line than the red line. And here I can do it again. My filter is consented yes. Again, I'm keeping my consented yes. If it is yes, I'm filtering my medium balance. I'm filtering where my balance due is greater than 500. And if it's consented no, I'm going to filter out where my balance is $10,000. And what I'm going to do there is I'm going to send them to 2 completely separate campaigns. I'm going to send one to my predictive campaign, but I'm going to send one to my preview campaign. Because if the balance is $10,000, I want my agents dealing with it. If they're a specific client, if they're a specific score, whatever the data I have that I'm using to filter and parse, whatever is defined, I can control what the TCN system does with it. These exchanges allow me to send to the P3 system. I can send to an SFTP server. I mean, theoretically, I could run a process of a file. I could run it through the TCN system. I could run it through these processes. I could gather information from something like a scoring company or the reassigned number database that Scott will talk about, and I can simply dump it back onto my SFTP if I need to. I can place the file into compliance. So I have the ability to upload files through LMS and dump them into a scrub list, because if I load a file with an easily identifiable consent field or date not to call, I can use a filter in LMS to drop that into the scrub file, and then I can limit what the TCN system does. I also have exchanges that execute customer journey or the consent list, or an Omni exchange, which would be for text or email. Now, the last example we were going to give you today was in regards to Story D. Now, Story D is not actually a client. Story D is about a software partner that we are working with that wanted TCN to take information from them, their software. Instead of exporting an SFTP, instead of creating a file and sending it somewhere, they wanted their clients to have the ability to retrieve information from the software. The only way to accomplish that is to execute API calls. So luckily, within the TCN list management services, we can create an entry point and we can create a web entry point. What that web entry point does is it allows us to define API URLs. It allows us to define methods and headers and bodies. So you can authorize, you can submit a token, you can gather that information and execute an API call to your own system of record, if it's available by them, and you can ingest that data into LMS. And once you have that entry point, you can connect it to anywhere you would like. Let's connect it to filter to old. And there we go. My web entry point now follows the same exact path as an SFTP entry point or a manual upload could. Now, again, keep in mind, this is fully customizable, and this is just the surface of LMS. What we were hoping to do today was give you some examples of how some of our clients and software vendors are currently using this process to try to save you some time, to try to make your life a little easier. If at any point you're opening up a file and changing anything at all before loading TCN, stop. If at any point you are manually loading files, but you can set up an SFTP script, let's talk. If at any point you are taking information out of TCN and manipulating it, you may be able to process it through LMS. Those are all valid conversations you should be having with your account management team to make sure that you are getting the most out of the system, as well as hopefully saving yourself some time. Now,
Thanks,
at this
Mike.
point, yes.
Mike,
Okay.
we had a quick question kind of relating to that. Is a user able to keep track of score over time and then later make decisions to refresh that score after a certain amount of time?
The TCN system wouldn't store something like that. You could update a collection in Journey. So theoretically, if you loaded up new data, you could overwrite the old data and you could execute a process based on that new data. But it's not going to be a historical instance where you can say, you know, if the score was low last week and high this week, run a certain way, because that last week's data will have already been overridden. So not exactly what's described, but we can store data. We can, you know, reference some historical data. We can actually, while I bring it up, we can add an enrichment. What an enrichment does is it allows you to do things like count how often you've called a number. So let's say, how many times in the past 30 days have I called this phone number and gotten the result of answered link call? And you can filter based on an account like that. Now, again, this isn't score, this isn't really your data, but you do have the ability to utilize some customer, or excuse me, some TCN historical data for filtering basis during the LMS process.
Thank you so much, Mike, for that context and for sharing more about LMS and how companies are saving time, money. A lot of our customers aren't able to quantify the amount of time they're saving, but you know, in a lot of cases, some companies are saving upwards of 40, 50 hours a week on data prep just by implementing some of these small changes in processes. Well, thank you, Mike, again. And next up, as Mike mentioned, we have the pleasure from hearing from Scott Brownlee. Scott is an industry veteran in the call center and financial services industry. And during his 30 years of hands-on experience in the ARM industry, he's focused mainly on the healthcare vertical and has gained a wealth of practical knowledge. We're happy to hear from Scott now about the new scrub process that we've recently implemented. And Scott, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Hope you're having a good day so far. I just wanted to touch on something that has been, I guess, a thorn in my side from running collection agency call centers, and that's dealing with our data. Many customers will get regular placement files from their clients, either on a monthly, weekly, or even daily basis. And once you load those into the CRM and match them against your additional inventory, typically what ends up happening is you have to then go out and perform certain scrubs on your data and then also look for data enrichment. So what you may have is you may need to go out and maybe you're going to go to IDI data to get bankruptcy and deceased consumer information because you don't want to collect on those accounts. You may want to check for active duty military, and you may want to go to Web Recon and Jack to see if you have a litigious consumer so you can take appropriate measures on that account. And then you have pieces that are enrichment, which you may be looking for better phone numbers, better addresses. You may want to go to a Locate Smarter to get a phone confidence score or best phone to call and when to call. And then I would imagine most everyone is using some type of propensity to pay plus a value score, whether that's through Intellatech, Fisk Global, Experian, or TransUnion as an example. And then for our customers that deal with self-pay healthcare debt, they may want to go out and do coverage discovery either through an Inovalin or a Waystar. So typically what would happen is the agency has IT, They take the file, they'll send it out to that first set of scrubbing for bankruptcy and deceased. They get the file back, they create another file, they'll send that out maybe to look for the next piece in line, active duty, and they go through multiple iterations of handling that file every day. With LMS, you can take that daily placement file after you've matched it in the CRM, upload it once into LMS, and then at that point, LMS will take it and push it to all of those appropriate data vendors that you're using to either scrub and enrich your data. So those results go out and come back automatically into LMS, so you'll get a result file that gets aggregated. And at the end, you deal with a result file. And what this will typically do is it can free up, if you're doing daily placement files, it can probably give IT back 45 minutes to an hour a day from having to process those. Now, one other thing I want to mention is that in our partner ecosystem, we do have partners in various areas of this data scrub and enrichment process. And because of the fact that we do volume, we can take 10 different customers' volume together. We may even be able to save you some money depending on the partners that you're using. And we do have some that can be almost all in one. When it comes to the reassigned number database, of course, we want to make sure that you hit that as well. And that's something that we're finalizing here at TCN, and it's kind of out, but it'll be finalized and incorporated into this process very soon. And really, in a nutshell, this is just about gaining efficiency and reducing IT time. You may be able to then reallocate those resources to another project that you've been meaning to get to and you can't get to because you're giving them some of their life back. And in a nutshell, that's really the process. I don't know if there's any questions on that, McKay.
No questions yet related to this new process, and but we did have a question about what the cost associated is using LMS. And right now, there is no cost associated to the LMS. But Mike or Scott, did you have any other insight into that, or the cost associated?
Yeah. So to utilize the LMS system itself, there is no cost. There could be a cost if you utilize LMS to access outside sources, what Scott just described, the reassigned number database, or maybe automating a cell phone scrub. Those would be a cost incurred, but to set up LMS, to ingest the data, to parse the data, filter it, and send it out to the TCN system or an SFTP server, that process is included in your permanent rate.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, we really try to provide that value. Another question just came through. Am I forced into using that flow? And I think this is referring to your flow here, Scott. Or can I customize it into my own flow? I don't use all of those scrubs. So how customizable is this, and what does that look like maybe on an individual basis?
Absolutely. This is fully customizable and can be applied. If you had, say, only bankruptcy, deceased, and you were doing a score, and then you wanted to do the R&D, we can go to the existing provider that you have with your credentials to get your file processed for your banco and deceased, and then run that down to your scoring provider to get the scores, and then push it through the R&D and return that result file to you. So if you have existing providers where you're utilizing them for various data scrubs and enrichment, you can certainly keep those and customize them. This isn't a hard sandbox. This is meant to be applicable to your unique business model.
Great, that makes sense. Thank you. At this time, we don't have any other questions, so we'll just go ahead and close. Thanks again for all those who joined and those who participated to make this such a great webinar. And thanks everyone. The recording of this webinar, as a reminder, will be available soon, so keep an eye out for it on TCN social media and website, and as well as in future emails. So feel free to reach out to your account manager. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.